Well, I want to convey to as a broad a number of people, like yourself, a person I don't know anything about, some of the ideas that I've been presenting to various levels of government since 1972.
For example?
Well, for example, that we need to reform our fiscal matters. In other words, we have to really affect the way money arises in Canada, how money is distributed, and what effect that would have on the affairs of our not merely commercial world, but our practical living world.
This is true. Can you give me an example of what you have in mind?
Yes, what I have in mind would be something like a universal family credit system. A universal family credit will be based on the wealth of the whole and not singular individuals that claim big chunks of it. In other words, everyone's wealth belongs to everybody in a manner of speaking, because after all, we are in the surface chemistry between Father, Son, and Mother Earth, and this is a metaphysical reality that's undeniable, just as all wealth, in a sense, belongs to all people.
Absolutely. So what's driven you to be this political and to get involved at this level?
I'm obviously English. I came here 52 years ago in October. I was basically chased out of Britain because my attitudes. At that time I was working at the BBC, and I'd been through the military, and my father and grandfather had both been in intelligence, and so I grew up in that atmosphere. But at 12 they sort of signed me up, and by the time I was 24 I was so angry with the British mismanagement of foreign affairs and so on, and I was well informed at the time, that I said I want no more part of this. And my experience as a little boy during the Second World War with Canadians was that they were quite a different breed in a manner of speaking. Of course, many of them were of British origin, but mixed breed of people who had a conscience, and they were people of character, and they were not. They were only boisterous against authority, and amazingly brave people. And so I thought, well, if I'm going anywhere, it'll probably be to Canada. And my grandfather had a great love of the people of Canada, especially the Aboriginal people, because as a huntsman for the Duke of Beaufort, he'd selected horses for a Chief Sitting Bull when they came over with the Wild Bill Cody. And he heard the story of the genocide that was going on then and how they were being... And the British Christian people, the families who were not so much churchgoers but acting out the ideals of Christianity, were very upset about that, of course. And any efforts to that the churches made in Canada were completely corrupted by the misuse and abuse of the power of the people that were actually hired to do the job. So it was a very, very ugly scene that developed. So the churches lost their legitimacy in the eyes of many Canadian people, and rightly so, because the churches had misbehaved, and that had brought about a great deal of suffering. And what we see today, the relationships of people to land, that is, grab it and run, is really a product of that attitude. You know, the Mother Earth is not something that we should be abusing in the way that all the years I've been here, including the rivers, including the forests and everything, has been in a state of abuse. So what motivates me? It's a vision I had in '75 of a new world. It was a new world that recognized every individual as a valuable bit of genetic material, if you will, and that we were all children of the Creator, and the Creator found pleasure or displeasure in how, and in a sense, how we find pleasure, a lack of pleasure in ourselves, because of our performance. And the Mother responds, Mother Earth responds in various ways, and Father, Son either rejoices or sorrows in certain ways. And the way we begin to get that integrated in a sense of only the what should we say, the substance of reality, we have to see behind that is something like undifferentiated conscious awareness. In other words, the all-knowing, the all-seeing, the all-presence is obviously everywhere, because every leaf on every tree responds, every living thing, every blade of grass has life force in it. And what people talk about is maybe the black energy. Well, it is the absorbent energy, but it is the energy of the sun that gives that absorbent energy of Mother Earth life. And that's in all of us.
And for when you say you were drawn to Canada, Canada's a large country.
Yes.
Were you drawn more to the West Coast because the Aboriginal beliefs were either less squashed as they were back on the eastern coast of Canada, and that some of the atrocities were maybe a little bit more fresh around residential schools, and with only about maybe 100 years in of contact, of colonization,
Yes.
versus 400 or 500 back east. It's, again, a big country, and here we are in a very small island. So how did you parachute yourself into this particular corner of the world?
Well, one never knows these things. It's certainly, in my case, I've never known to what extent I was still some kind of a sleeper, you know, and really was being controlled from Britain through my father and through the admiral that he was working with, or whether these were free will choices that I was making. So certainly when I went to the Governor General in '72 with a brief saying, you know, this warrant that Mr. Trudeau has called for is now beyond his authority, and that we have to reform the Bank Act, you know, that was the end of my career in broadcasting. So since then, you know, I've been snipping at the heels of trying to straighten it all out. But of course,
Any success? Can you look
yes.
at any of your activism to go, there's been an impact here?
Well, one never really knows. I happen to believe that Canadians are very, very long-suffering and also very smart. Now, I'm not flattering them. I'm saying I've never really met a stupid Canadian. I've seen people down the East End of Vancouver, and you know, and people you would think have really nothing to offer at all. And I generally find that you know, Canadians uniquely are very, very remarkable people, very long-suffering. But ultimately do wake up, and that's why, you know, with my brave efforts on YouTube, I've been calling for a rebellion. You know, I'm saying, don't pay your taxes. They have no authority over the right to claim taxes unless you are making profits. In other words, if I'm engaged in the business of making profits from transferring this to that, then I'm taxable. If I'm just earning a living by having a job and being able to pay my bills, you can't tax me. There's absolutely no authority in the world that says you can take away a livelihood from a person. Profit is different, but our society has become so corrupted. Every level of society has become a mythology of its previous self, every level. Regretfully, from the law down. The law have clearly been corrupted for many years. When the Supreme Court of Canada said, yes, it's okay to kill somebody as long as you're drunk, that to me at that point, or at least...
Didn't they repeal that?
No, well, they have, I'm not sure, but they certainly did introduce it at one time. I would think that, generally speaking, the level of justice in this country, well, you only have to consider the marijuana matter alone. You know, I mean, that is a disgrace. It is malum prohibitum, not malum per se. In other words, it is what is prohibited, but not evil. You know, so if it's not actually evil, then it cannot be prohibited. And anyway, it's one of God's plans. I mean, to me, it's a blasphemy. I went to the Supreme Court of Canada in 1979, following my effort at '72 that got nowhere, except the cops came round and said, "Oh, Mr. West, you know, what are you up to?" And I said, "Well, I'm just trying to straighten things out." And at that point, I thought, well, you know, if they're going to harass me and deport me or something because of the truth I'm trying to communicate, I'll go for the big one and say, hey, we have to end this prohibition. So I grew it publicly in Terra Nova, Richmond. The man came. I planted 42 plants. That was 1 year for every year of my life. And now I'm 75, so that was a number of years ago. I went through the various levels of court, did 3 months in Ocala, of which I was very proud, because for an anthropologist, I mean, there's nothing like being able to go into the prison and you know, and actually see from the other side of the counter what's actually going on. You know,
It's very phenomenologically involved from a frontline perspective.
Well, that's right. You know, so I felt that was the, you know, the time in the trenches, and then I was quite involved with Ian Hunter, who was the best organizer in Canada I ever met for the Prohibition, and he died regretfully under unusual circumstances in Nelson, and I've never been satisfied with the fact that, you know, he just had an accident, although those things do happen. But, you know, he was a key man, and then other people came in who were not interested in the moral and ethical and spiritual values, although they acknowledged they existed, and of course the medical, but they were there to make money from that. And so we had a whole movement which was suddenly intending on making money to support a movement which was actually already in existence, which was working entirely satisfactorily with a core group of people on a totally voluntary basis. That they were not, we were giving marijuana seeds away, you know. That
So are you looking at legalization and taxation, or are you
No.
looking at something different?
No, I'm
What's the
looking-
vision?
Well, first of all, I don't believe in any taxation. In fact, I don't believe in the way that money is. So we started out talking about money. Everything you have to put in the context of a new structure of money. And how that is, you see, the other thing is I'm not a dictator, right? All I'm trying to create is a framework in which people can hang the best ideas. Some of the best ideas I think I have, but if I claim this is the way, then that's going to drive
This
away.
is one way.
This is a way, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And by doing that, then of course you encourage the broader public, which is why I'm doing this now, and that's why I do the YouTube, because it is necessary, and that is why I appreciate you asking questions. Like, ask me a question about how does it influence the lives of women, for instance.
Are you talking about the issue around cannabis prohibition? Is that where we're going with that in terms of the influence of the lives of
Well-
women? I don't know if we're looking at the macro level, if we're looking at the day-to-day. What are we ferreting out?
Well, let's look at equality.
Okay.
Let's leave the marijuana issue on one side, but it's a very important issue, and it's really the focus, in a way. But also electoral reform. I've been promoting none of the above option. So if you don't like any of the parties or candidates, and you think that if called upon, being a Canadian, you would rise to the occasion and do a good job representing your community, that's the system that I believe most Canadians want. And I've done quite a bit of research over the last 15 years before I put it to government, or before that, before I put it to government. And I did work hard to get the Citizens Assembly, and then they wouldn't let me address it and put my idea forward in a practical way. They loaded the place with, wannabe PhD political scientists that, whatever we do, we have to maintain the system, the status quo.
Because if we put the none of the above, wouldn't that mean that if none of the above wins, candidates A, B, C, and D could no longer run because they fell under the none of the above, and they would have to step aside in order to let another candidate come in?
That's the way they've done it. That system was tried, and was tried in Oregon, as a matter of fact. It's been tried in different places. It doesn't work. All you're doing then is going back to the parties and saying, what's your next best guess? Right? No, we don't want anything to do with political parties. I do not personally believe that there should be a career option that you call being a politician. No more professional power brokers. None. We need to be able to engage the common people, because we are one common
As a
people.
community volunteer, for example, to take it in that kind of context where you have your life, you have your job, but in addition, some people have hobbies, some people garden, some people could be involved in
Yes.
the community development, whether it's at a national level or at a local level.
Precisely. In other words, it's returning to the structure of the ideals of jury. And so what would happen would be, if none of the above won against all the other candidates, then there would be a random selection, a similar selection but not weighted the way it was, that they used at the Citizens Assembly, which I promoted, right?
Talking proportionality?
No. In other words, there would be a men and women's circle established. We go back to a tribal form. And the tribal form would mean that the women would meet in women's circles, the men in men's circles, when they had come to an accord about, what's this guy talking about, this money thing? What can we really do? Okay, well, let's send it around the circle and see what we think. Well, yeah, it could be done. Okay, fine. So the men have agreed, among themselves, and it's not a debate.
No, you go around the circle. Everyone
You
talks
go around
until
the
there's nothing
circle,
left to say.
Everybody contributes. If they don't have anything to contribute, they might like to introduce a friend that they know from the community, that they know expresses that for them, right? And they can do that. So in other words, they can, in fact, hold on to the position, but encourage expertise from outside. So let's then say we have both sides have come up with something like an accord. and they present this accord in a plenary session, the men and the women. And once again, it goes around, and anybody says, can we improve on that? And somebody says, yeah, I think, what about this? Okay, we'll consider that. No. Well, okay, yeah, we like that. We'll add that in, right? But then finally, and all the time you'd be receiving input in terms of priorities from the common people. They could send in, we'd like to see this done or that done, and what do you need to do this, and how can we help? Because it has to be a proper relationship between management and the common people, and that does not exist. And it doesn't exist partly because Canada has always grown up in the idea of sovereignty of the sovereign, right? And not realize they've even been diddled out of that. Now, in fact, it's a corporate estate. It's not even a crown in the best sense. And honestly, I'm not a monarchist, but there is value in some of the elements of that. But the crown has not been performing well, because the crown should be the people who are addressing the courts and saying, well, come over for whatever we do, mate our corgis or whatever we do when we're in our,
Well, our crown is token rubber stamp at this point.
Oh yeah, it's regretfully, it's much more corrupt than that. Much more corrupt than that. In a forensic analysis, most of these people, would be doing serious time. And I'm not the guy to do that. But there are many guys out there that I personally know, especially in Victoria, older men in my age, right, that really do have the forensic information. And many of them I've met personally, and many of them I know quite well. Many of them I don't know at all, but they're out there. Canadians are not fools.
But that information will be snuffed, because there's some very high-powered people who don't want that type of information released.
Well, they do now. See, this is the point. I believe this is why it's so timely, because I believe they're realizing that they're losing control. They've lost control in much of the Middle East, and the United States is losing controls very quickly because it's lacked proper leadership. And if you rely on leadership, and leadership does not have the courage to lead because it doesn't know where it's going, then there should be no leadership at all. In other words, that's why I say we need a framework into which the better ideas can be fitted. And then when that's done, and it's done with the general approval of the larger community, then you put it out for referenda to the people for authority.
It's kind of like tribal council style.
Well,
in some ways.
Well, yeah, no, I think it is. That's exactly what we're striving for. But there are obviously, evolutions that need to go on. Mm-hmm. We don't need a revolution. We need a rebellion and an evolutionary period. And that's all I'm proposing. I'm saying we don't need to take the cops on with sticks and guns. We don't need to be flown over at 100 feet with helicopters in the name of hunting down somebody who wants to grow their own medicine. Is that insanity? I mean, that isn't, or locally, the post office, some local upstart, hierarchical, lunatic, fringe, main, boss decides that it's not determined who delivers our mail, it's determined by an aptitude test of somebody who doesn't live here, doesn't know who, what are they trying to cut down on? Crime? What kind of crime are they trying to cut down on? Fraud? What do we grow here? Apples? I don't understand it. In other words, what happens when power goes mad? Power goes seriously mad. And now people are beginning to wake up to it. And as people wake up to it, then of course they need to have an avenue other than violence for expressing it. And this is why I believe that by not paying taxes, and what I have been promoting for a very long time, in spite of all the party's best interests, I'm saying don't vote unless they have none of the above on the ballot. And many people say, oh, well, I always spoil my ballot. And if you look at the numbers over the last many, many years, the numbers have been dropping. The last election, they got very, very slightly better than in British Columbia.
Well, our voter turnout's very low, but by not voting, we're also disengaging from the structure, but you can't change the structure from the outside. You can only change the structure from the inside. So that's just leaving the people who are vested in what they have to continue to vote and continue their power.
Well,
that's what's happened in the latest elections, because the youth are completely disenfranchised and have given up. They don't feel that there's anything that they can do, but if they actually use their voice, it could have changed the scope of the election. So we've got a number of things going on simultaneously here.
Oh, I totally agree, and everything you say is correct. Let us not be mistaken, but you must understand the young people are not stupid. You know, if we say all the parties are corrupt, they go, "You're right," and they don't argue. And so you say, "Is that why you don't vote?" That's right.
So what's the next step?
Well, that's why I'm promoting none of the above. It's the logical, necessary next step. I even tried, 15 years I've been pushing it with the Elections BC. I went to court, the Supreme Court of Canada, on May the 12th, trying to persuade a judge of the Supreme Court to tell the Lieutenant Governor and the acting Chief Electoral Officer to give some serious consideration to this, or yes or no, Mr. West. That's all. I'm saying yes or no. If no, then no. Then I can retire and say, okay, well, screw them. Let them get on with it.
What did you get as a response?
No response, because nobody takes responsibility.
Oh, dear.
They don't take responsibility, not one of them. I go in there and I say, well, look, I go to the Ministry of Attorney General, because that's part of what you got to do once you've filed. And I said, look, I'm not adversarial. I'm not bringing out the big guns and saying, you buggers are on the line here, and we've got people that can nail you big time, I'm not doing that. I'm coming in here gently and saying, boys and girls, don't you think it's time to give some really serious consideration for some evolution in our way of doing business? Can this not be done? I don't go around saying, well, I want to see the moneyless state. You can't have the moneyless state. But you can have hello, pup. You can have a moneyless state. It's just a matter of good management of collective affairs and moving us away from, what they say, it's not money, it's the worship of money. And people who, where it arises, of course, it arises from fear. And fear is that people take their brilliant minds, their metaphysical biocomputers, and focus on the possibility of bad outcome.
Well, that's misdirected energy.
That's really all it is. That's really all it is. And yet, the anxiety. People run around making millions from telling people, well, we're all going to die, And people go, oh, no, we're all going to die. Nobody gets off the planet alive. Now, I believe in undifferentiated consciousness, personally. Fluid Druidism demands that each one of us is carrying one photon of conscious awareness of the great light that is being presented to us every day, that knows what's going on everywhere all the time, every leaf, everything, right? Impossible to imagine. Yes, for a human mind, because we can barely handle, wiping our bums properly or staying, whatever. Why do I have to go to the lowest common denominator for that? But we do, in a way. We have to go from the scatological to the sexual, to the...
Well, people fear what they don't understand, and people fear what they cannot touch, see, and hear. What they can't taste in the immediate. The minds are not calm enough, the lives are not calm enough to allow the knowledge that's within to connect.
That's exactly, to connect the dots. To really be able to put this next to that. Oh, it doesn't fit there. Oh, it fits here. When people begin to be able to approach the necessities of reality in a practical and harmonious and loving and sharing and conscientious and peaceful way, then we're ready. And we're ready now. Because all those people that you would say, well, they're just totally apathetic. I can go out on the street, and have gone out on the street, not recently, but I went out on the street and in 10 hours, what was it now? 10 hours? I got 40 signatures on none of the above. Was it 10 hours? No time at all. I went to, Hornby, everybody here went for it. I went down to New Westminster. Everybody liked it in New Westminster. I went to Vancouver. Bingo, bango, bongo. It was like that. Anytime I go to But the thing is, I handed them in to the Lieutenant Governor. I published a little leaflet where a personal petition you could send in. And I said, well, where are they? Oh, we don't know. Well, what kind of government is that?
They put you in file 13.
With all the other few people. So I thought, well, that's a waste. And then later on, when people started getting apparent, well, you're making a list. You're making a list of people who, are suspect, and that once the cops get a hold of them and the CSIS, and they'll be knocking on their door. And
wow, they're bored.
Well,
don't they have something better to do?
Well, I don't think
Good
they do.
grief.
I really don't think they do. I think the whole value of secrets, are deceit, dirty tricks, blue meanness, rip-offs, all dark things. But what's to be secretive about? I mean, unless you were actually involved in some criminal activity. That's why I came out on the hemp issue all those years ago. I'm not going to hide the fact. Hey, this is what I do. This is I didn't realize it was medicine. I thought it was my sacred relationship to the mother. I could inhale something that elevated my consciousness, that made my brain work. And looking back on it, I suspect that's why they have been so determined to reduce its use.
Which is tragic, because every inch of that plant, from the fiber for the clothes to the seeds for salads, I mean, there are very, very few offerings from nature that can actually offer themselves holistically.
That's right. And you can make epoxy, better than epoxy from it. You can make stronger materials than carbon fiber from it. You can build airplanes out of it. You can, Ford made cars. Everybody knows that out of it, and they'd hit them with sledgehammers, and it would bounce off, and you go, "Oh, that's pretty strong."
We're even looking at construction materials nowadays,
oh, yes.
given the whole the green movement, so to speak. So hempcrete is an example.
You know
of
that, eh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I know Don that promotes that. Don Briere, great man. Yeah, really.
So it's being practical. It's almost as if there's a fear because, someone's getting some enjoyment out of it. We must be able to tax that. We can't have happy people. We can't have that.
Well,
I'm trying to understand the paranoia and trying to understand it going back to temperance back in, in the 20s. But it's a different, is it the same energy? Is it a different energy? The fear of then and the fear of now, 90 years ago.
I think it's a great hypocrisy. I think it's pious hypocrisy, and I think it's one of the most damning of all souls engagements. I think if a person assumes for one moment that God loves them more than it loves this other bunch over here, they have nothing but blasphemy in their minds. And that's why I feel sad for people who practice that kind of pious, that it's just a great hypocrisy, and truth has a way of karma has a way of dealing with that. I don't. What does they say? Justice is mine, saith the Lord. And in the old days, of course, that could be the serf saying, "Yes, my lord, yes, my lord." But I think it's the power of the Trinity of the sun and the earth and the surface chemistry that roll in that actually determines the substance of reality.
Well, I mean, our existence is, whether it's random or miraculous.
Yeah.
Your coffee's right there.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Whether it's random or miraculous, it is. So why not enjoy it?
That's right. That's why I think, people say, well,
it's quite beautiful. Good grief.
And the fact that, whether we enjoy eternal sleep for our efforts or, another waking state, there's no real consequence in the final analysis. As long as you feel that you've done everything you can possibly do here to ameliorate the idiocy and the suffering
Have we helped out? Have we given more than we've taken? Have we,
Well, I'm a minimalist. I don't believe in actually having... in fact,
well, we don't really own anything. That's a whole other conversation altogether.
Well, I think it is a very important conversation because people say, well, I own all this. Well, okay. Mm-hmm. For a while you do, and then probably your children do, or they'll probably gamble it away. So I don't know how much you own it. How much are you enjoying it? Well, that's a whole different question. And I think the pursuit of happiness is a legitimate pursuit. Because
people get lost in the pursuit and fail to be actually happy in the moment. The pursuit of happiness is actually a little bit of a red herring, isn't it? Because just to be happy?
Well, just to be happy, of course, is something you achieve only after you've really overcome most of the self-induced fears. You know.
Oh, just that.
Huh?
Oh, just that.
Oh, just that. That's all it really is. And finding compassion for every single living being. That's why when I walk across the farmer's field here, and I look around for the old bull, he's not there. And I go, oh, and I talk to the farmer. Oh, well, you know, he went. I said, well, did he get a good price? Oh, no, he was only hamburger. And I thought, okay, those cows, can they grieve? When one of those cows had calves with him for 10 years, you know, and they've all gone. And every day when they round up the calves and they march them off to market for veal, I guess, you know, the cows are all, you know, crying. I can't eat meat. I can't eat chicken. Even a lettuce has a heart.
So sustenance with respect and gratitude.
Well, yeah. I mean, I do off the odd oyster, and I generally, you know, try to use a sharp knife and hope that's how quick it'll be for me. But then I thought, but I wrote a little thing about that. I thought, well, you know, maybe not being an oyster is not, you know, it's not bad. Maybe you've got kind of trapped in the shell, and these little bits of grain of sand keep coming in and bugging you, or some little snail walks in and you become friends, or I don't know. I guess I anthropomorphize just about everything. I see the spirit in it, you know.
What message, as you have a number of different key points within your philosophy, if there's one key message that you really want to impart, what is that one key message above and beyond that wraps up?
Know what made you loves you, and will let you evolve. Love is letting other vehicles, vessels, or vermin evolve, and we're all vessels of a soul, of a photon, of, you know. And by the way, I think, you know, doing a little sun gazing is probably good for you because it gives you vitamin D, and, you know, keeps the old biocomputer well oiled, you know.
Very much so. Well, John, are there any last things you'd like to comment on for today's interview?
No, they're never last things. They just go, every time you open another door, there's another path that they follow.
Another path.
But thank you. I appreciate what you've done. But just tell me something. Tell me what do you think? I mean, is this idiotic? Is this pursuing a moonbeam? Is this? Can you see any remote possibility in bringing about the sort of reforms I obviously would like to see?
The way I see it. Hold on
a minute. Let me have the camera. I want you to...
No, I don't want to be on film.
Oh, okay.
The way I see it is eventually there's enough repression and suppression of people where it's a smaller group of powerful people bringing oppression to an ever-growing group.
Absolutely.
And you can only, not to go Marxist, but push the proletariat so far. And I think at a certain point there's certain levels of poverty, whether it's within our Aboriginal communities, whether it's in our urban ghettos, that how much can people take before they snap?
Yes.
How much can they take of the hypocrisy of seeing somebody moralize to them that has possibly no morality? And at what point? The numbers are there.
Yes.
We see it in the Middle East.
Yes.
They finally toppled Gaddafi. So, so to speak, the numbers are there. So how is this transition going to happen is my curiosity.
Very peacefully. That's my whole purpose. In other words, I believe it. I'm a peacenik, you know. I went through a war as a little boy on the south coast of England, and so I saw something of the war. I didn't like it. And then after I came out of the Air Force, because at that point I was still wanting to be, you know, ambitious and move through, and I was moving through, you know, I was moving through the various, you know, things. I was doing systems analysis, was really what I was doing. So I'd go in, and very incompetent man, and go in and find out why the hell it wasn't working, mostly because of incompetent men like myself. Or lazy men like myself, you know. So in other words, there were...
Human error.
Let's put it down to human error. Yeah. Right, and I made lots of them. So I learned them that way and passed the information along to my dad, who passed it along to whatever they passed it along to, and sometimes changes were made. Yeah, but see, it's always been my intention not to be I'm not a revolutionary. I don't believe in revolution is flatland stuff. You replace one bunch of bad guys with another bunch of bad guys. I believe in evolution. I believe we shouldn't be on this. You know, the status quo is something which just means the way it is. It doesn't mean to say that's the way it's always got to be.
Will we reach that peaceful civilization that they show you on Star Trek sometimes? Of, oh, we're so beyond war and fighting. That's so yesterday. We don't do that anymore.
I think we could formalize that. I think we could probably have, you know, a desert place where men who really felt like, or women, if it can, no, not women don't. Women don't take up lessons. That's why women run the world and men are blamed for it. Because men take up weapons and women don't like warfare, rightly so, and I don't like warfare. Yeah, I think that I think my whole purpose really is having seen this coming for almost all the time I came here, because I did a pretty swift analysis of what I was seeing in Canada, and I saw most of the challenges that existed in my own country. That is, everyone was getting into bed with the Americans and playing let's grab it and run. You know, let's be John Wayne and be bossy and pushy. And
all the credit cards about to get cut up.
I never had they did offer me a credit card in the very early days, and I absolutely...
You're talking the American credit card. They have a limit of, what, 15 trillion that they tell us of? Well, they're not doing very responsible math. It's like a teenager with mummy's credit card and the car keys. That's not going to work out in the end.
Well, of course, that is simply a lack of moral and conscience. And regretfully, that is the way they've been largely educated. In other words, it doesn't matter if you know the subject as long as you pass the exam. Therefore, it's okay to cheat. Mm-hmm. And once you start cheating... It's like when you start thieving. If you start thieving at an early age, it probably takes you half your life to not thieve at all, right? Or lying, or any of the conventional traps that are set for us as the divine will, to see if we have what it takes to be useful agents serving the divine. Because that's the way I see it. I see there's a certain point where you realize if you're on side with the good guys, you can't lose, and if you're on side with the bad guys, you can't win. And that's the way it is with war. Any war you start, that's why I don't believe in revolution. That's why I believe rebellion is a vital option, because rebellion, it's always there, and you're always making moves like these young people.